Welcome back to the Mental Health Matchmaker podcast. I'm your host, Brooke, and on today's episode, we are joined by Adam, a registered therapist who offers individual, couple, and family therapy in Mississauga, downtown Toronto, and virtually. In this episode, Adam shares how psychology and philosophy shape his approach to therapy and how core beliefs impact self-worth. Adam also specializes in men's issues, so we also talk about how he helps teen boys and men navigate anxiety, depression, identity struggles, and so much more. Let's get into it. Men's issues. Can you just go into what that looks like in session, how that shows up in your therapy room?
For me to answer that directly, I think it would vary depending on like the age range. You know, I have a couple clients who are going into high school, for instance. So the issues that they would deal with are vastly different from like, let's say, an adult male, right? So I guess it's situation dependent. But I think the main common denominator across all, these young men or men in general is that there seems to be a deprivation of self-esteem and confidence in men in society.
You said something about it feeling uncomfortable to be vulnerable and to embrace the full spectrum of emotions.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about that specifically?
The best way I can describe it is I feel like men in general, their default mode is to always have their armor up. And oftentimes they have this armor up to hide their scars, right? I think true vulnerability, it's almost like, you're showing your scar instead of hiding under your armor, showing that sense of resiliency that you embody instead of hiding it, right? I think the unfortunate reality is that many people in society kind of denounce men who kind of open up about their mental health issues or don't like when they show emotion and stuff like that, right? But I think it's important, on the contrary, to think about the other side. It's like, no, we should empower men to be vulnerable and to share their story. Suicide rates of men are quite high in society, and the majority of them are men. So it's definitely a significant issue, right? I think it's not talked about enough. It's about like showing those scars to people you know and you can trust, that can support you well and love and care for you. And I think that's the main idea about it, is like you don't always have to have your armor up all the time in your life. Like that's exhausting.
I like how you pointed out that there's so much courage and vulnerability. So in your therapy space, you provide a room where men can explore this range of emotions. And like, what do you see happening in the process when people are able to tap into that?
I think for me, I have a really long-standing client that I see. I've seen him for over a year almost. And, in the beginning of therapy, for instance, like I went back to the therapeutic notes and I was reading them last session. I saw him recently. And, he's made such great progress. He had a lot of self-esteem issues, a lot of confidence issues, depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. And he one of his goals was to seek a romantic relationship. And he just didn't know how to do it. He didn't know how to navigate that space, right? And now he has a girlfriend and he's doing well. And he told me something that was great. He's like, I don't have an older brother in my life, but you always felt like an older brother, which was like, for me, so like, it made me feel so grateful for him to say that to me. Men in general, they lack the safe space, the non-biased, non-partisan kind of neutral person to share what they have to say to someone like they can trust. Like, sure, they have family, sure, they have friends, but oftentimes like there's always a condition of who you tell, like what their reaction's going to be when you tell them. Are you going to worry them? Are you going to stress them out? Are they going to is going to lead to them being angry at you or frustrated with you? Are they going to see you as a burden in like the family or friendship, whatever it is, right? So I think that's an issue as well. But coming to therapy, like I endorse it for all men.
Yeah. I feel like I'm glad this has started to become a conversation that more of us are having. But I also still can't believe how early on we are in the journey of normalizing this, like men going to therapy, men opening up emotionally, men connecting with themselves emotionally, supporting other men in their community, like support groups and stuff like that. We're still at the beginning. And I think that's so important to point out. If it still feels uncomfortable or scary, that makes total sense. Growing up myself, I still remember those words thrown around, like man up, suck it up, you're a man, don't cry. Yeah, which blows my mind, especially when we're in this space and we know how backwards that messaging is. We know how valuable our emotions are. How much information our emotions give us.
How they convey to us, right?
Yes, exactly.
How they affect our thoughts and behaviors and vice versa. How they all work interconnected with one another.
Can you talk a little bit more about self-esteem? Is there other areas within men's issues that you see the self-esteem issue come up?
I think a lot of it is like relationships. I think a lot of men have issues with establishing boundaries with like either like their romantic partners or friends or, family members. Often my clients find it a hard time establishing boundaries so that they're able to kind of deal with what they're dealing with, prioritize themselves, but not have it come at the expense of someone else, you know? And I always tell them like sometimes self-care is important, you know? Like look at that, like, a plane analogy. When a plane is crashing, what do they tell you? What do the flight attendants tell you? Put your own oxygen mask first before you go help others, right? Because if you don't take care of yourself first, you don't adequately put yourself first, how are you going to take care of others, right?
What could self-care look like for men?
Taking showers every day, like good hygiene, stuff like that is
Mhm.
great, right? I have some depressed clients who constantly say, like, doing these daily routines is like a chore for me, like getting out of bed, brushing my teeth, taking a shower. These are things that are like chores for them, right? That's on the extreme scale, is like this depression notion. But for everyday high functioning men, I think one of the self care routines for them is like to take a few moments for themselves every day. I feel like a lot of men are so go in society nowadays that they don't sit consciously with their own breath and like reflect on themselves, reflect on their day, reflect on what they have to offer for themselves and for others. I think that's an issue too. Even if you go for a walk, it's a small win. It's something. You start off slow, right? Like I think it was an author named James Clear, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you ever read it.
Yes, yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, he talked about like, if you get 1% better each day, at the end of the year, you're 365% better. And I was like, that concept is so profound because you could like build up these small wins daily and it could compound to something greater, right? It's almost like an interest rate on like your ability to do something in your life, which is great. So I think that's awesome. But
I think he also talked about the importance of each step that's taken and how it happens incrementally.
yeah,
He talked about the state change. I don't know if it was from like liquid to ice cube or the reverse. Either way, how we often see like the full solid cube or the water, and we don't really get a chance to observe the in between of the state change, and that there's so much value in every single step taken. And each step is necessary to change that initial state to the next. And it's so important to not overlook that as well, noticing how your efforts are really adding up and that you are creating change when you're in it.
And I think too, like I find that majority of my male clients that come to me, they deal with a lot of self-esteem, confidence issues. And I feel like they always tell me, they're like, I'm very pessimistic. I see the glass as half empty. And I always tell them, like, listen, sometimes the transition from, the glass is half empty to half full, sometimes it's like more specific than that. Sometimes you got to imagine that the glass is half full, but the water hasn't been poured in the glass yet. That makes sense.
I want to shift into a topic that we're both passionate about. And I was pumped when you brought it up in our first chat, which is stoicism. Can you just talk about the link between philosophy there and therapy and how you bring it into your space?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients find this really interesting, but I really got into stoicism, I would say probably in my undergraduate degree at University of Toronto. I have a minor in ethics and I took a bunch of philosophy courses. And now in hindsight, I wish I did a minor in it or a double major, but that's regardless. It's okay. It's the past. But I started reading stoicism. I didn't know what it was. And I remember my teaching assistant recommended this book by Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor back in, prehistoric times. It's called Meditations, and I literally bought it that day. Pop culture defines stoicism as like, not showing emotion, being kind of stern, being resolute, being like motionless. Stoicism is more like being aware of your emotions. If you have a sense of awareness and greater clarity of what they do for you, instead of like, repressing them, you can be aware of them and understand how they have an effect on your life, whether that's your behaviors or thought patterns, how you treat people, how others react to you.
There's one Ryan Holiday quote that I thought about after we chatted. Let me reference my notes so I don't mess it up. It's too often convinced of our own intelligence, we stay in a comfort zone that ensures that we never feel stupid. I feel like that could be applied to our lives in a million different ways.
Yeah.
Little ramble. I did a series last year just for fun based on that quote. It was called Beginnerhood, and it was me putting myself in all these rooms to try out new activities that I knew I'd be bad at because I've been such a perfectionist my whole life. And I was like, I really want to find a way to actually prove to myself that it really doesn't matter if I look like a fool. And it didn't. It didn't. Shocker. No one cared that I was bad at all these things I was trying.
I think the thing is about most people in general is that like people think that everyone has a spotlight on them when they're trying new things, when they're navigating new, jobs or new interests, hobbies. It's like people think that everyone's looking at you. No one cares.
No.
Everyone has their own lives.
Yeah.
Like no one cares. Sometimes the best way to get through it is just to like when it's risky, just do it.
Yeah,
Just do it.
exactly.
Like I tell my young teens or like my, early adulthood, it's like you're in your teens and you're 15, 16, or you're in your 20s. Like this is a time to try out everything you can, find out what your niche is or what you're good at and run with it. Take it and run with it. Because you're never going to have this opportunity again to like literally find out what you're good at.
Exactly.
So I tell them all the time, like what would you do about like me, trying different jobs? I'm like, dude, like try as many things as you can. Even if you quit like a year in, 6 months in, like who cares? Get that experience in, find out what you're good at. If you don't like it, move on.
And ask questions. First of all, people love to share what they know.
Yeah.
And I leaned heavily into that during this time. I did a CrossFit class and I felt ridiculous in it. But as soon as I walked into the room, I just said to like a few people that I could tell were absolute pros. I was like, listen, I know absolutely nothing. I'm going to be terrible at this. Give me feedback. I'm open to it. I'm receptive.
Yeah.
People love it. It also expanded my whole view of how kind most people are. And how willing they are and eager they are to offer a helping hand.
I tell it all the time with like some of my clients who deal with social anxiety. It's like, it's human nature. People love talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So if you go into an interaction with someone and you're like thinking, you have like the preemptive anxiety. So you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm worried about this interaction. How's it going to go? And then you have the anxiety during when you're having this interaction. And you're thinking how you're going to respond. And you're not even truly present with them and listening to them. And then you have the post anxiety. You're like reflecting on how the conversation went. Like put that aside. Literally look at the person, ask about them. Who are they? What do they do for a living? What's their life like? People love to talk about themselves. Like I'm on a podcast talking about myself.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. And that's the thing about human nature is that like people just love to share about their lives because everyone is unique in their own way. They're authentic and people love when someone asks about them, they love to share their story. Everyone has their own story. So I tell some clients, it's like if you want to, pursue a relationship or make a new friend, it's like ask questions.
Yeah.
People will be more than happy to share stuff with you.
I have this visual of like this like cracking open happening when you do that. Yeah. And then you're kind of in the conversation now. Yeah. And then through that asking of questions, I guarantee because we all have some tiny bit of overlap, even if it's just a little, that there might be some piece of the conversation that then does resonate and touches on a part of you that's true, that feels real.
Yeah.
Because I think for myself, at least, any social anxiety I used to have when I was younger, it really came from me trying to hide the fact that I was anxious. And it was like a battle between the truth of how it was feeling and then how I was trying to perform in a way. And the odd time, what I love and I find refreshing, and I think a lot of other people do as well, because I've witnessed it, I've gotten better at it, is also just being honest when it feels safe to name it. Sometimes, even in these podcast conversations, when people say, I'm really nervous, and I just love, like, let's just name the thing and then we can actually talk about it because that's what's true for us in the moment.
Anxiety doesn't have to be as deemed as like this negative or bad thing all the time. I think it can be quite useful. Bettering friendships, relationships, communication. Like I think that some anxiety is good because I think anxiety just shows that you care about what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you didn't have it, you'd just be like indifferent.
Yeah, there's like a power there, really. And I think in a lot of these episodes, we've talked in so many different ways about the power behind being connected to our emotions and what they are trying to tell us and how they are a source of information. And the more information we have, the more equipped we are. And that kind of can become the armor that we talked about in the beginning. Yeah. But it's exactly the opposite picture because we're in tune with ourselves and we're more connected. That's true power, I believe. You also mentioned a little while ago, a few minutes ago, about cognitive behavioral therapy. And you bring that into session as well, right?
Yeah.
Can you chat a bit about what that is for people that don't know?
Yeah, so cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a very scholarly backed and scientific backed kind of modality. It was, I think, originally developed to treat depression, I believe, by Aaron Beck in the 60s, I think it was. And now it's kind of been refined a little bit or modified to treat other, disorders and issues as well. I think it treats anxiety quite well. It treats mood disorders, personality, just a wide range. It's very versatile. What I start off with is I kind of go through the basics. So I first introduce the cognitive triad model. So that describes how like your thoughts, your behaviors and emotions are all in like a triangle and they all feed and interconnect with one another. So they influence each other. And I get them to understand the basics of that and how that kind of shapes how they behave in society, how they make sense of the way they are in society. Mm-hmm. and how they react to their situations in their life. So that's basically a first step, kind of getting the foundations down of it. And then I talk about things like, core beliefs. What are your negative core beliefs? What are things that you were socialized or conditioned or based on environmental or situational things, or things that happened in your life? What are some things that you inherently believe to be true about yourself in spite of what other people tell you is the contrary? So oftentimes I see people with negative core beliefs like, oh, I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm not smart, I am not good looking, whatever it is, I'll never amount to anything. So they've been fed with like information from their, parents or teachers or peers growing up. It's like they aren't something at that age. And they develop this kind of core belief, negative core belief, as they develop into adulthood, that this is factual. And then every time there's evidence to suggest in their life that that is factual, they believe it even further and greater
strengthens the story perfectly. It's like perfect evidence for this story to grow.
Yeah. So I talk about that a lot. And then what we work on with that is like things like, restructuring and reframing, whether that's something as profound as and significant as a negative core belief, which would be harder to do obviously in early sessions. But if you work on things like thoughts, like a negative thought or, maladaptive thought, we work on like restructuring or reframing that. So that would look like, instead of saying something like, oh, I experienced this, therefore I'm worth this, you would say, I had a situation where I experienced this, I felt whatever XYZ. This initially made me feel like XYZ, which is based on my negative core belief. But then you would say probably and or but statement. So you'd be like, but there's evidence to suggest the contrary. So this is where I would bring in something like a thought record. So typically what we want to do is you want to see that your evidence against for the hot thought is a lot longer than the evidence for. And that typically happens for a lot of my clients is they're like, wow, like I realized that like I have so much support that suggests the opposite of what I'm thinking, which is like, holy cow.
Which is shocking because we are so convinced of this story that we've built, and a lot of us aren't aware where the pieces came from that allowed us to form this story and then strengthen it without consciously being aware of it. That's what therapy is so incredible for. Giving us a space to, first of all, like have the ability to talk about these things, to write them down, and then to become aware of them. And seeing them on paper would blow your mind if you had a lack of awareness before.
I write it on the board with my clients sometimes, and they're like, dude, like, wow.
We've uncovered this like secret formula that's like magical in a sense. You see that if you were to practice this over time, that we can start to quiet that other unhelpful core belief and strengthen the opposite.
Like for me, like I've been doing therapy probably since I was like 16 or so. I'm 27 now. So I've been doing therapy since I was 16. So arguably like 11 years or so. And I was against therapy myself. And then my therapist, who's like my mentor now, he's an unbelievable guy. He, started doing CBT with me. He introduced the thought record. I think at that age, I was like a little bit apprehensive to do something like that. I'm like, oh, homework for therapy? Like what? Like what's this whole?
Because I have enough homework.
Like I got hockey, I got school to go to. Like I don't want to deal with this stuff, And then he's like, I'm just give it a go. And he's like, you're a smart guy. Like, figure it out, do it. We'll talk about it next week. I'm like, okay. So I sat down one day. I did it 30 minutes before the session, by the way. Yeah. That's how against it I was. And I did it. And then I'm like, I had like this like aha moment, like this epiphany. I was like, this works. And I talked to him about it. He's like, what'd you think about it? And I'm like, this is incredible. Thought records work. Understanding your thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, like it's significant, right? Like understand how they interconnect and influence, and it's important to know.
Okay, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was sports pressure. We covered that a little bit. Can you go into what that looks like with your clients?
For me, like I played competitive sports my whole life. Like I was a student athlete, and I felt as though back in my time, there was like a lot of pressure to perform regardless of like how you feel or, injuries and mentally. I got like a lot of young athletes I see, and they come up to me and they're telling me like, I get anxiety before games. Sometimes I'll puke before games. My coaches tell me to play through an injury, and like I just physically can't do it, but I don't want to be seen as like soft or. So I think that is a significant issue because people like they want to achieve their goals, and whether that's, make it to the professional level, they'll do whatever means necessary to get there. I've had 8 concussions in my life, and my last one, I was told to never play again. And, that was part of my identity. I tied hockey and baseball to my identity, and I was told I couldn't play anymore. Like that was, that broke my heart, And I think that they tie so closely their identity with what they excel at, like what they're good at, whether that's a sport or something they really enjoy, right? And I tell them, I caution them, like, listen, like, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to hang up the cleats or hang up the skates. It could happen when you're 16 or it could happen when you're 40, but it will happen, so brace yourself for that moment. And, if there's times where, you're injured or you're not okay mentally, like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek support. It has no effect on your character. It means you're human.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're not strong.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the fear of being seen as soft.
Like, I had a coach one time, I had a neck injury. I literally couldn't turn my neck. And he's like, he pulled it from a movie. I don't know if you heard of Miracle on Ice. So he's like, your neck's a far long way from your heart. And I'm like, dude, like, I can't turn my neck. Like, how am I going to play? And I'm like, I'm not playing and whatever. But I just found that funny, and I was like,
it is funny. Like, in the moment, it probably felt terrible because you're invalidated.
But in hindsight, now I'm thinking, I'm like, I couldn't turn my neck. Like, I got hit from behind. I couldn't turn my neck.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm going to play through that. What if I hurt myself even more?
Yeah, how am I going to be of value to the team once I go against my body and then it has backlash and I'm in a worse state?
Yeah, so I always find that fun. But I think there's like this kind of general, like you mentioned, the word pressure. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. There's a pressure to, battle through adversity and injury. But I think there should be maybe a cap or a certain limit to what that looks like. I think that if you're pushing yourself to the extent that, far reaches the capability for you to perform at your highest level, I think that's when we got to, call it stop, call it quits, and be like, listen, take some time off,
Yes. I teach yin yoga, and I talk about how we go into certain postures and we're meant to hold them for a period of time. Yeah. Usually I do 3 to 5 minutes. And I always talk about getting to the point of discomfort and knowing that we will likely embrace some discomfort. But once it veers into territory where we're now experiencing pain, ease off.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to teach you to push beyond your limits. Silliness.
Exactly.
So there's value in embracing a bit of discomfort. That's the like pushing yourself and expanding your comfort zone and broadening your window of tolerance for discomfort. And then there's a point where, like you said, if you take it too far, you're just causing damage. For what?
And I think too, like watching professional sports on TV and seeing them play through injuries in the playoffs, like cracked rib cages, broken bones, that kind of creates a normalcy of like what is the expectation for young athletes growing up and developing and entering professional sports. When you reach the age where like your coach starts yelling at you and screaming at you and swearing at you, or when you finish a game and your dad picks you up and he's screaming at you and yelling at you in the car. My dad never did that, so I was very fortunate and blessed. Like, he would just say, you could have done better at this, good game, but he never got mad at me. So I was fortunate enough. But I experienced a lot of coaches yelling at me. It comes at an expense of a couple things. It comes at an expense of that young teen self-confidence and development and how they dictate what they have to offer in sports and in their life. That creates an urgency for them to always perform at their best in spite of how they're feeling. And that can transition into like a career, or when they have a family. It's like, okay, now when I have a career, I got to work 60 plus hours a week because this is what I'm used to. I got to push through it. I got to push through the pain. They gotta overcome like this kind of sense of exhaustion and burnout, because that's a manly thing to do. Or when they have a family, they gotta do it all for their family. They gotta work hard. They got all these things they have to do because that's a manly expectation that society dictates as normal for them to do. They don't sit and reflect and be like, okay, like, listen, I'm gonna take some time. I'm gonna go to therapy. I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna do some meditation, self-care stuff. I'm gonna take care of myself, because I know that if I don't adequately take care of myself, I can't adequately take care of others and be there for others and love others.
Exactly. Yeah. There's just so much conditioning. I think it's really important that you did validate that this doesn't come from nowhere, right? Yeah. It's full on conditioning. And when it starts at such a young age, it is starting to shape how you perceive yourself in the world. Yeah. And it becomes very limiting, and it can cause a lot of damage. And it becomes harder to see that there are other ways to approach life in general. So on that note, you're located in Mississauga, right?
Yeah, Mississauga, Toronto, downtown, and virtually.
Okay, Mississauga, Toronto, downtown, and virtually. Lovely. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. We could probably talk on and on and on about all the books and everything. But thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
No worries, Brooke. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.